Hello, welcome to the JS Self Care Mind, Body, and Soul podcast. I am your host, Janelle. Today's episode is Journey to Self Care with special guest Kathryn. She is an author, a coach, a speaker, and a lawyer. Kathryn, can you please tell us about your journey to self care and also tell us how we can connect with you?
Yes. So my journey to self-care started very early in my life. I have dealt with anxiety and depression probably since high school. And so I was very aware of the need to focus on my self-care from an early age. Even though I had that and that awareness, it obviously doesn't make things perfect or doesn't mean that you're not going to encounter adversity. So as I was growing up, I found myself very much focused on the idea of living up to expectations of other people and putting a lot of pressure on myself, which just obviously made my anxiety worse in many ways. But despite that, I always had a really big focus on wanting to become a lawyer. And the main reason was in middle school, I read Letter from a Birmingham Jail and To Kill a Mockingbird. And obviously, MLK was not a lawyer, but he spoke about just and unjust laws. And that, coupled with the idea of being able to be a lawyer and make things right or make laws right, really resonated with me. So I set myself on that path and I said, okay, where do I want to be? How do I get there? So I set it up and I started with my first legal job in high school, and set myself on that trajectory towards going to law school myself. So I was in a bunch of different environments, legal environments. And it became very apparent to me that most people in those environments were not happy. They were definitely living up to other people's expectations and succumbing to the pressures of the job. And there's not to say that it's not a important and pivotal job that we're doing in different areas of law, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of yourself. So I saw a lot of people. Yeah, I saw a lot of people around me doing that. And so I was already aware early on of what I was going to be getting into. And despite that, I still decided to go to law school. And of course, it's extremely stressful. I have constantly managed my self-care, my mental health since high school. But again, it doesn't mean everything's perfect and just easy to go through. And then I sat down to take the bar exam, the entrance exam the exam to get my license to practice law. And the first time I missed by 1 point. The second time I missed by 2 points in terms of passing. And finally, the third time I passed. But it was only after I came to the realization that fighting myself in addition to the test was not going to be productive. Turns out, after it took me 2 times of taking the test to give up on that notion. But I was fighting myself because I'd been on a low dose of medication early in college and it worked really well. But I had this preconceived idea that I was somehow weak for being on medication, even though I was very proactive about self-care and mental health. So I'd gotten off of it, which was appropriate at the time. But then I was fighting it before the bar exam instead of just helping myself out. And so finally, before that third exam, I went to my doctor and talked to her about it. And she's like, look, you're not the first person. You're not going to be the last.
So true.
And yes, absolutely. I'll get you on a medication. Luckily, it worked out. It was the right fit for me. It took effects really quickly. And I credit that for helping me pass the bar exam. I got out of my own head at that point. And so finally passed the bar exam. And it had really taken a toll on me, not passing the first 2 times. Luckily, I was in a very fortunate position financially with myself and my husband. But still, it's hard not to feel like a failure when you're not living up to your own expectations of yourself, right?
Yeah, so true.
So
we don't want to fail. We
No.
are humans, and there's no human that want to see failed.
No.
We only look for pass, and we don't look for like the learning experience with failing. There's a learning experience with failing.
Well, and to that point, I really think I'm the last generation, maybe the beginning of the generation, I guess, where every child was treated as a winner. And we had that, participation trophy mentality. Like I remember in the beginning where that idea was new. But I think after that, it just became such an ingrained idea that what it ultimately has done is taught people to not know how to cope, when they encounter adversity. So if you're expected to succeed all the time, you're told you're a winner when you're not, because that's inevitable and that's life and nobody's perfect, you don't know how to cope with it. So on top of the idea that nobody wants to feel like they're, losing at life, when you've been, taught this idea that you're always a winner, and then the reality hits that you're not, it's crippling. It really is. So I passed the bar exam. I managed to hold out for my dream job, which was amazing. It was a law firm where there was a partner who had been doing this for about 30 years. He really taught us by letting us practice, as opposed to a lot of places that will just kind of keep you under their thumb in the back room and doing all the grunt work. So it was myself and 2 other associates, and then this partner. And it was a great environment. I learned a ton. We had a good time doing it. And about 1.5 years after I started there, I got a call from the senior associate asking us attorneys to come into work beforehand, before staff. And so I get there, and in my mind, I'm the youngest, I'm the newest, I'm the least experienced, and I'm a female. I must have done something wrong. Like, I've just always been so self-critical that's where my mind went. And it was absurd. There was literally no evidence to support that, but that's where my mind still went. And so we get in there and sit down, and I find out that our partner has committed suicide. He had been stealing he had been stealing from clients for 8 years. And aside from the obvious gut punch, it just didn't line up with what we knew about this person, right? I mean, at least if you have a really horrible individual and that happens, you're like, oh, okay, well,
you expected it.
Right.
But from a great person, you would not expect it.
Never in a million years.
You guys are all working in a law firm.
Yep.
You're supposed to be documenting what monies come in, what monies go out to the clients. So
yeah, it was really hard. And he left notes. There wasn't like we didn't, we're guessing. He left notes admitting this and saying if it was between this and prison, this was the way he was going to go. And
so he probably knew, I'm sorry that he committed suicide, but he probably knew that the law was going to eventually be coming after him.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And let me be clear. Like I experienced suicidal ideations in my own life. I've been on the periphery of people who attempted suicide for health reasons. They didn't want to be a burden on family, and they didn't want to be here to go through the treatment of cancer. And then this is my third experience with it. And they're all very different reasons, right? And in this instance, I had a really hard time processing it, like I said, aside from the obvious, just because it was so selfish, not in the sense that I don't think suicide and those feelings are selfish. I understand because I've been there. You're just so overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
But for what he did, he just didn't want to have to deal with it. He was trying to absolve himself of responsibility. And that's where I had to hang up. Whether he had taken his own life or just ran away, from the country. Like, it didn't matter to me at that point so much as him just trying to avoid responsibility. So.
And which is a hard thing.
Yeah.
Taking responsibility for a crime that you knowingly committed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it was a blow, just that he did it, that this person in particular did it, that he was talking out one side of his mouth and, doing something out the other. And it was just shocking, to say the least. And so the senior associate, myself, and one paralegal decided to kind of continue the firm to the extent that we could. And that meant taking all those cases. A bunch of them were in litigation. For people that aren't familiar with the law or litigation.
Yes.
Litigation puts it in a whole other stage. There's a lot more deadlines, a lot more work that goes into it, a lot more paperwork. So very time consuming.
So you and your partner were working overtime.
Well, let me put it this way. I was working overtime. My paralegal was working overtime. My new partner at that point, he very much had checked out. He checked out mentally. He checked out physically. Let me be clear. We all had a huge amount of trauma we were processing from this situation. So I don't make light of that. But like I just said, we all had trauma we were processing. And
yes, absolutely.
Myself and my paralegal managed to show up and still, to the best of our ability, work and make things better to the extent that we could for our clients. So this continued for about 1 year. I was basically running the firm at that point. Like I said, my partner was just very much not participating. I kept trying to
engage
him, engage the situation, see if, I could give it time. He'd kind of not snap out of it. I was much more proactive about it, but, see if it could get better. And then finally I was halfway around the world on a trip and I got a call from my paralegal and I said, I appreciate you, but why are you calling me when I'm halfway around the world? Right. Like you can talk to our partner. And she said, he's not responding. And she had like an emergency decision that had to be made or we would commit malpractice. And so I gave her the answer, the permission to go ahead and do what she needed to do. And then I get back in the country that Monday and my partner's not at the office. He's gone to some retreat in South Georgia, some silent retreat where he's unavailable for like 5 days. And obviously he knew I was out of the country. Obviously he knew that, I was coming back at that point in time. And when I realized that Monday, I was sitting at my desk, I distinctly remember about halfway through the day, just not being able to process another thought. Literally, I couldn't reason anything. I just felt such a loss, and I'd never felt that lost in my life. All I knew was that I needed to get home. And I needed to be with my husband because I was starting to have suicidal ideations. I was so exhausted. And for people that fortunately have not been in that place or that mindset, it's not that I didn't want to be here per se. I just didn't want to have to deal anymore with what I was dealing with. Right. Every waking minute was spent consumed with this process and these feelings. And
you didn't get to grieve because you went straight to work.
Yep. That's literally that day when we found out he committed suicide, we sent staff home and I offered to stay at the office because I tend to do better when there's something tragic if I keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've kind of reverted to. And I was still going to therapy. Don't get me wrong. I was going to therapy this entire time as proactive measures. Thank God. Because if I hadn't, who knows?
You needed it then. So.
But it still didn't matter. It was just survival mode. And we were operating on adrenaline for that entire year after the fact. And so when I called my husband on the way home, he was in a meeting and his secretary, I called her. I said, you need to get him out of his meeting. I told him. And so he met me at home and he just held me while I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I finally, fell asleep from exhaustion. And I remember waking up the next day and it was as if everything was just crystal clear. I knew for so long before that, even before the suicide, I knew that I needed to set boundaries. I needed to value myself. I needed to have more confidence in who I was. Any number of things that we kind of know, but it's a whole other
we
thing.
We may know, but we struggle with things that we know already. It's a struggle.
And to believe it and to actually embrace that. But at that point I did. I was confident in my abilities. I wasn't going to take, no or anybody questioning me for an answer. And at that point, that's when I shifted my mindset and said, okay, I'm going to run my own firm. I can't care more about this business than the person whose name's on the door. And I can't possibly go work for somebody else because it turns out I had some trust issues with people at that point. Go figure. And
no, absolutely. Because no matter what, if someone is stealing from a firm, from an agency, from wherever you work at, when it's investigation times, a lot of people go down that had nothing to do with it.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's where the trust is. Absolutely. But also you got to push to go out on your own and to run a firm the way you want to.
That was it too. That was it. I felt like I had put so much energy and effort into making something work that somebody didn't care about or was in a place they couldn't. Regardless, I couldn't go and work for somebody and just do a half-assed job at that point, in my opinion. And so I figured if there's any time to try this, I might as well do it now. And we ended things amicably. I got to take half the cases. So I started out, on 2 feet, and I was able to start my own law firm and really move forward from that. And even most recently, just to show that this is always an ongoing process of self-discovery and evolution, I've realized within the past handful of months that I love practicing law. I don't love all of the restrictions that are placed on me by the realities of the practice, right?
Okay.
The insurance companies that keep me from being able to resolve the case, or, you know, the clients who may be really grateful, but they have unrealistic expectations despite everything I've shared with them. So it just puts me in a situation where I become the whipping boy a lot of times. And as a result, I've shifted to see what I can do through writing my book about my experience overcoming addiction to the status quo, and coaching other people to not only recognize that they can live a better life, but live a better life. Because it's one thing, again, to read about somebody doing it, but if you're so lost and you've been operating on, autopilot for so long, you don't even know where to start.
There's so many people that operates on autopilot.
Yeah.
That's just doing things not because they're happy. I know you heard this saying, it pays the bills.
Yeah.
So you're gonna risk getting high blood pressure, diabetes, die of stress because it pays the bills.
And that's so incredibly sad to me, because none of us know for sure when our time is. And yeah, we all want to think it's, 80s, 90s and good health while we sleep. But the reality is, for so many people, it's not. And to think that you get to the end of your life and look back and go, wow, I really wish I lived a happier life,
And we can.
That's too late. Yes, but we can. That's the whole point, is that you don't have to go through something tragic to start making decisions that benefit you.
Absolutely. And what I tell people is, if you're going for rich and you're really in the helping field, like you're in the helping field, you want to help people, this is not a job to be rich in.
No.
As a social worker, I love what I do. So I do it all the time, even when I'm not getting paid.
Right.
I'm helping people. And it's because I'm living in my purpose. I'm doing what I like to do. So I don't get mad and be like, oh, I got to get up at 9 a.m. I'm happy to get up at 9 a.m.
And that's the biggest thing, is finding your passion and changing your reality to match that. It's not easy. I mean, self-discovery and self-improvement is not an easy process. I'll be the first one to say it. And it's not a list of 5 things that you can check off boxes for and be done. Let's be honest. If it was that easy and you could, everybody would have done it by now. But
so true.
It's incredibly worth it. And you have to be open to the process and what you can take away from it and the quality of life that you can have. Because again, the alternative is so much worse to me. So if the reality doesn't scare you, maybe the potential for what could be at the end of your life may.
Absolutely. And look, one thing about you, Kathryn, you even said it a few minutes ago, but you suffer from mental illness.
Yeah.
You didn't let that stop you. Like, no, you could give me 5,000 diagnoses. I'm going to take this bar exam, because you said, I believe when you were in junior high school, you wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you went with what you wanted to do, and you didn't let those other barriers stop you from being the greatest person. Because some people may take the bar exam and be like, that's not for me, I'm gonna look at something else. And knowing that they really want to be a lawyer, but because they failed that one time, they give up.
And it's hard getting back up. But I think one of the biggest things, I've always been somebody who, if I don't understand something or if I encounter adversity, I learn as much as I possibly can about it, whatever the topic is. And so that's what I did with my anxiety and depression. I would just delve into it. And, it's a chemical imbalance. We all have stress to varying degrees. It's a spectrum. But you don't have to have a formal diagnosis to recognize the impact stress has on you, first of all. And second of all, start talking to someone or start taking proactive measures to manage your stress. Why wait to the point where you either A, have a formal diagnosis, or B, are having suicidal ideations to start being proactive, right? Nobody waits until they're about to have a heart attack before, well, some people do, not intentionally, but you shouldn't wait to get to that point to start doing something about your health. So it's the same thing. It really is.
Absolutely. We need to take care of our mental health. If our arm breaks, like you said, heart attack, arm break, you're going to go to the doctor, right? Because it's painful. If you're feeling imbalanced, go to a therapist.
Absolutely.
Or a coach, or what your pastor, because some people don't actually have to go to therapy.
Right.
They could go to, like, if someone come to me, I'm a life coach, I'm a social worker and a life coach, but I can coach them, right, into going into therapy, tell them how amazing therapy is. Because, you know, the stigma is, if you go to therapy, you're going to be crazy. You're going to be labeled crazy. Like, what is that? What is crazy? I have my crazy moments.
We all do.
We all do. Like, if things just don't go right, we may stomp, cry, whatever. We show an emotion because things are not going well. Feel that way about your mental health.
Yep.
Make sure your health and your mental health aligns with one another.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, I think historically that's been the perception, right? I mean, we would literally lock people away in institutions for having emotions that were extreme because we kept it together for so long. It's bound to come out at some point that's, you know, extreme, and that's okay. Like, you're allowed to feel those emotions. But nowadays, thank God, you know, things have changed so much. We have so much more room to improve, but we accept the reality of stress, of mental health being something we need to address. So yeah, if it's a coach, if it's, you know, a religious figure, if it's a organization, say like a men's group or something.
Yes.
Start there and find somebody you can trust and that is objective. And then if that person's not gonna be able to fill that role for you the way you need it to be filled, then maybe look at a professional and ease into it. Nobody says you have to jump in the deep end if that's not something you're comfortable with. Just be receptive to the idea of benefiting from a third party's objective input.
And that's why I came up with Journey to Self-Care.
Yeah.
Journey to Self-Care, because my goal for the podcast and for the listeners who listen to my shows on Monday is to let them know that it's a journey. Nobody woke up and had it all together. Nobody was born with it all together. I can guarantee you one thing: we were all born naked.
Yep.
But that is a guarantee. Nobody came out of their parent with clothes on. That's one thing. But start the journey. The journey is a rough journey. It's not an easy journey. No. It's really not.
And take baby steps. What I always recommend to people is, especially, like I said, if you've never done this, you can't expect yourself to just start running if you've never even walked, right? So find out. I do what I call mission, vision, and values with the people I coach. It's almost like thinking of yourself as like a little human startup. And for your values, literally get a list of values. You can find hundreds of them on the internet and whittle it down to like 3 to 5. And then you start making decisions in your life based on those values. And it gives you guideposts. You can't, you know, if you don't understand, you know, where your parameters are in life, where you start drawing the lines for yourself and for others, how can you possibly start making decisions that are going to be beneficial for you? So understanding your true values and drilling it down to those few makes making decisions for yourself and with regard to others a lot easier. And it's about retraining yourself, because you've done something for how many years in your life now. You can't possibly think that you're going to wake up the next day and be perfect at it. But having the tools to succeed and start setting yourself on that path is what you can do to help yourself and start on that journey.
So true. All we ask is utilize the tools that are given. And nowadays we have a lot of tools. We have Google University, YouTube University. These are tools that were given to us, not to believe everything in the tools, but take what you want and put them in your toolbox. That's what I tell everyone. As a coach, as a social worker, I'm not a fixer. I cannot fix you. I mean, so many parents say, you're the social worker, fix my son. And I go, I don't have those abilities. But what the ability that I do have is I can give you tools to parent and give your child tools to be a child.
Right.
Because some children, like for instance, my son, he has anxiety, right? Yeah. So everything doesn't work. He chews bottle tops. He went from chewing T-shirts when I'm like, does this kid have pica? But he was only doing T-shirts. And then we worked around it. And with his anxiety, I taught him to say, you know what, when your friends try to tease you or label you, you tell them, I learned different. That's what special. I do things which makes me special, because the goal of the world is for everybody to do the same thing the same way. Be different. It's okay to be different.
Yep. And the reality is you don't want to be like everybody else. I mean,
Exactly.
you're made unique, and embracing that is one of the most freeing, levels you can get to, I think, in your life. And to say that I've achieved that, is really something I'm proud of. And it doesn't mean that I don't second guess myself sometimes. Again, this is not, nobody's perfect. It
You're
literally is
human.
impossible to be perfect. So let that go. But yeah, you're human, and this process is part of life. But you can live such a better version of yourself, and one that doesn't get completely debilitated by adversity, by starting on this path. And it just takes a couple baby steps to start heading that way.
But we all can do it.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
no one who cannot do it. You just have to start. Don't let your age be a barrier. I'm too old to change. That's one statement I don't like to hear. I say, so you're going to be the same way forever? And then I develop, you know what? I'm going to grow and evolve every single day.
Yeah.
Every day I'm going to do something different. And when I first started, I was like, do I like this? And then I started loving it, and I started teaching it. You could do something new every day.
Absolutely.
If you never hopped, start hopping. If you never ran around the block, do it. You could do something new, inexpensive, for free every day. You can ask Google a question on your smartphone, because at this point in time, everybody has phones because there's no more pay phones. Right. So I tell people, utilize that baby computer in your hand. It's a computer, and it could teach you something other than making a phone call.
Yep. Absolutely. It's about challenging yourself. And as long as you get to the point where you decide that you want to start trying, that's the biggest hurdle. That's the biggest hurdle, is deciding that you want to do something different. And then from there, everything else is relatively easy. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but that's the biggest hurdle you have to get over.
So true. So can you tell us, please, about your business and how you can help others? I know you're a lawyer in Georgia, but how can people contact you?
Yes. So my personal website for my personal brand is Kathryn F. Burmeister. I'm sure you'll have that written out because it's a unique spelling. But that's the best place to get in contact with me for social media, for coaching, for consulting work that I've been doing, speaking and writing as well. So I love to hear from people. And I'll even say that the first person to reach out to me on social media and referencing your podcast, I'm happy to send a copy of my book to. Even though I'm a lawyer and that's the backdrop, I truly believe anybody can benefit from the general idea and shifting your perspective on what life can give you. So I'd love to hear from people.
Absolutely. And what is the name of your book, and what platforms can we get your book from?
Yes, ma'am. Overcoming Addiction to the Status Quo. And you can get it on Amazon, or you can go to my website and there's a link to Amazon from there. So it's a quick click and you're over on Amazon.
And everyone, please know that in the show notes, it'll be her contact information, a little bit about Kathryn and how to get her book, because that's very, very important. But Kathryn, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. If you could leave the audience with some type of advice or quote, what would you tell these listeners who's listening to this podcast?
Yeah, it's actually a quote from my book that really turns out I wrote it, so it resonated with me. But especially the idea of take courage in who you are and what you deserve, because there's only one version of you, and you need to be confident in your trueness and your ability to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish, and that you deserve happiness in the long run.
Yes, everyone deserves happiness. So, Kathryn, I want to thank you for telling your story and most definitely letting people know the most important thing. Life is a journey, but everyone can start their journey from wherever they're at in life at this moment.
Thank you for having me, Janelle. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.